This is Ideas Pod at Raisina 2025 with Firstpost. And we have our special guest today, His Excellency, Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Mariano Grossi.
Good to
Director
be with you.
General Grossi, welcome to Raisina 2025 Ideas Pod. Energy is a hot topic today. And energy has become very much enmeshed in the geopolitics of the hour.
Yes.
We've seen energy being used as a weapon. We've seen flows of energy being disrupted, whether by the Houthis in the Red Sea, or in the case of Nord Stream 2 by an act of sabotage. So energy is definitely being weaponized. And even the financial system, the interbanking system, which kind of facilitates energy trade, that also has been turned into a weapon. Now, in this context, there is a rekindling of interest in nuclear energy, which had kind of gone on the back burner, especially in Europe, after Fukushima. Why do you think nuclear energy is on the way back? Why is there a resurgence of interest?
Well, indeed, what you said is right. We have a debate today on energy which transcends the energy-specific realm by going into what we call now energy security and other areas or descriptions of the issue. I think when it comes to nuclear energy, what we are seeing is what I like to describe as a return to realism, more than renaissance or revolution or grandiose adjectives to describe it. I think it's a return to realism because quite obviously we live in an economy which in many cases, in most of the cases, is in need of bigger degrees of electrification. In a quest for decarbonization in many countries. And the need for baseload energy is very clear. Nuclear energy has always been there, and there is a realization, which was quite evident at the COP28, the Conference of the Parties of the Climate Change Convention in Dubai 2 years ago, when in the final document you would find a very unexpected formulation with every country, not only nuclear countries, said nuclear energy must be accelerated alongside renewables. So this was a first. It was almost a Copernican moment since nuclear energy was, as you said, the back burner or even ostracized by some. What we see now is enormous interest and growth. In India, growth, real growth. In China, in Japan, return, big time. In North America, in Canada, in parts of South America, and even in Europe, where you have the only case of phasing out after a sort of conventional wisdom that people were moving out. In the end, it was only one country that phase out, and it lends itself to an analysis in and by itself. We are not getting into that, but we see in many countries this. And interestingly, when you combine this with your premise of the energy security, it's obvious that we see an intense interest in nuclear energy in Central and Eastern Europe. Czechia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and even Poland, which was the only country in that part of the world which had not introduced nuclear energy. And this has an obvious energy security connotation because of the previous energy mix where gas coming from the east was prevalent. So we see all that, and we see different drivers for this, which is a fact.
So a healthy dose of realism, you were saying. Now let me get back to the realism question. Fossil fuels at least were better distributed. Now, as far as nuclear fuels are concerned, there's still a concentration, if you start talking about production, in key countries. Maybe Ukraine, Australia, a few others, which really control 2/3 of the trade in uranium.
Uranium.
Yeah. So how does this look for energy security when fuels can be weaponized, their supply is disrupted, and nuclear has always been a subject of geopolitics because of non-proliferation concerns and everything else. So does this not add to the uncertainty, the insecurity, rather than the safety of nuclear energy?
Well, when you look into the uranium production, there is no shortage of uranium at the moment. There are some people who are speculating about the tripling of current nuclear capacities and whether that would happen by 2050. And they
No, I'm not even talking about quantities of the enough quantities
of oil.
I'm talking about the geopolitics of it, and I'm talking about concerns, issues, embargoes. In the case, say, there are so-called proliferation fears, going into the wrong hands. No, there's a whole lot of other geopolitical
when it comes to
nuclear.
Let's go one by one. When it comes to non-proliferation, of course, this is one of the raison d'etre of the IAEA. There's no any country can simply switch on a nuclear reactor, small or big or of any size, without being inspected, unless this country is outside the NPT regime. And even when you are inside the NPT regime, like in the case of India and others, you do have a specific inspection scheme. It is impossible, with the exception perhaps of one country, to have a nuclear program and being completely outside any international monitoring. So the prospect of the spread of nuclear technology being equated to a diminution or a decrease of security because of proliferation concern is very remote. Is very remote because the IAEA is there. True, with the war in Europe, for example, there have been sanctions, there have been limitations which are not specific to the nuclear sector. You can see that being replicated or applied to other sectors. So I don't see this as a nuclear specific or nuclear inherent problem that you may have.
Okay, there's some interesting ideas also which have come out of the IAEA. For example, you have the low enriched uranium bank in Kazakhstan to enable people to create stockpiles. Are stockpiles the answer to some of this?
Well, I must say this was something that was developed more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And at that time, I think it has a value, but at that time there was an idea that as a way to reassure countries that they would always have access to fuel, perhaps without having to enrich uranium, could be to have in international banks. That idea, I must say, did not materialize.
So that is not workable, and that is not
well. It is good in the limited way it has come to be. We have, and we are very grateful to Kazakhstan, who is hosting this LEU bank, which contains enough fuel to load one or two cores of a nuclear reactor. But in the end, the original idea, I want to say, was a different concept, which was more ambitious, and I don't think that road has been followed in reality, because there hasn't been any specific shortage. And frankly speaking, limitation of technologies is an idea that is very difficult to be accepted. At some point, there were also a group of countries that were saying, okay, if you want to have nuclear, we can help you, provided you yourself say that you're not going to do this or that. That is a concept which, of course, was resisted. I can understand why that happened. I think more than cutting the access to technology to countries, what you need to have is a good abidance to the non-proliferation regime, being inspected when you have to, like an auditor, like a taxman that comes and says, are you in good standing with your obligations, more than saying, well, there's some things that you cannot do.
So, there's a very important phrase here, cutting access to technologies.
Yeah.
Nuclear technologies are very closely held.
Yes.
And the fear is that because of those closely held technologies, it is far more difficult to democratize access to nuclear energy. That is one of the biggest challenges which comes in the way of energy security through the nuclear option, I would say. Now, is there something down the horizon which you could tell us about, and just look forward the future in the development of technologies, or any of the new technologies like small breeder reactors, molten salt reactors? How close are they to commercialization? To take care of some, first of all, will they take care of these concerns? Can they take care of some of these concerns? And how far are we from getting them commercialized?
Small modular reactors are very interesting because, I mean, it's in their name. Small is small, which means
small is beautiful.
Small is beautiful, sometimes not necessarily, but let's say that small is beautiful, as the saying goes. It is easily deployable. It is relatively cheaper than big. It
gets rid of the problem of not in my backyard.
It is
and safety.
Exactly. It is modular. Which means that you can have a small modular reactor where you have 2 or 3 modules, and you add one more if the village or the town that is being fed grows, or the data center that is connected to it is also expanding. So all of these elements which you didn't have in the typical normal nuclear reactors make it very attractive. It doesn't mean that this is the new nuclear, that this is going to replace the traditional nuclear power plants as we know them. This is going to be a different path, a different alternative, if you want, which is going to be catering for different types of needs. Desalination in some countries, access for example, in very big countries like India, where you have remote places which might not be well connected to the grid, you can have a small modular reactors. Or in Siberia, or I don't know, in Patagonia, in my own country. So in remote places, or related to specific functions, like data centers or steel, or very interesting to shipping. Shipping industry is looking at naval propulsion, naval nuclear propulsion, not submarines. The commercial, mercantile shipping industry. So as you can see, there are new, I mean, like in the economy and technology, there are new things that are happening. There are new alternatives, new possibilities, new options. And interestingly, nuclear is offering different products to cater to these new needs.
So, and what is the status of the commercial viability? How far away are we from that?
Well,
will they be competitive?
Well, again, it's 2 different questions. In the first place, I think we are not seeing them yet. They are in the process. Some of them we do have in Russia, in China, which were more for demonstration purposes because they are not intensely looking into that, although they have the technology. For example, in the case of Russia, you have floating nuclear power plants, which are very interesting. Some African countries are looking into that, for example. It's very interesting. So, but in general, here in India or in Western Europe or the United States, what we have are designs that are being developed. They have to be licensed. Nuclear licensing takes a little bit of time. So for the first of a kind, FOAK, for the first of a kind, it might take 6-7 years. Once you have a first of a kind, the nth of a kind, it's going to be, and that's a little bit the business model. Once you have a modular, it's going to be like the commercial aviation air industry, where you are going to have like turbines that are fabricated in series.
What about alternate fuel cycles away from uranium? Thinking in terms of thorium, thinking in terms of fast breeder reactors, which use different.
They are all interesting. I think thorium has historically been of great interest in India because of the availability of the mineral here. The reality of the market is at the moment it's still the cycle is still centered around uranium, but thorium has every possibility. I think it's a matter of scalability and money more than anything else. But even this can change. So I see very good prospects. In terms of other non-traditionally cooled reactors like molten salts and others, there are different models. There's high temperature gas cooled reactors, there's molten salt. They are different. I think all of them are viable. We are seeing them. In Russia, there will be one. In India, we have one. So I see these as alternatives that the industry is developing, and as proof again of the innovation that you see in nuclear. Some people say nuclear is an industry of the 1940s. Of course, this is not true. As we can see, there are all these different alternatives that you have to have fission that can be metered.
So do you see nuclear as the energy of the 21st century?
It's one of them.
One of them.
Is one of them. We do not advocate nuclear energy dominance. We do affirm the validity of nuclear as baseload energy, very dependable, very reliable. We are going to be having reactors. The reactors that India is commissioning now will be here for almost 100 years.
Thank you. Thank you so much for educating us all about what is happening in the field of nuclear energy and your optimism. I think it is breathtaking. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Great to be here with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.